Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 126 of the Actual Fluency podcast. The podcast for anyone who wants to learn a foreign language. In the podcast, we share tips, tricks, and methods that will help you become fluent much, much faster. I'm joined by industry experts, top language learners, amazing polyglots, and all around cool people. So stay tuned for new episodes weekly. And today I'm joined by a fellow language learning podcaster. He goes by the name Polyglot Azren, and he has a show called The Language Learning Show, which is also on Anchor, where I'm hosting the Actual Fluency podcast recently. I know a lot of you guys use a podcast app or iOS, the built-in on Macs and iPhones and Android to listen to the show, but there is a platform behind called Anchor, which is really cool. And I know some of you guys use that, so I just want to give you a shout out. Me and Azren have a really good long discussion today about language learning sort of in general, but we focus a lot on some of the underlying psychological, not problems, but more like difficulties. So some of the traps that the brain is setting up for you and some of the ways you can overcome it. And it's actually a really interesting discussion that I would love to have every day. Actually, I guess I could, but that would maybe get too much. So enjoy the show with Azren, and if you want to learn more about Azren, you can find him all over social media. He's super active. He's got a big YouTube channel as well. He calls himself a language nerd. So check it out at Polyglot Azren. Now, speaking of checking out, be sure to check out this show's sponsor, Classica. They're providing audio courses on their website where you can sign up and get all the access to all the languages for one subscription. So it's really useful for people who want to learn more languages at once, let's say French and Spanish or other related languages, or maybe you want to learn some of the languages that don't have a lot of content elsewhere. So they are really into language preservation, so they have some pretty rare ones there. So go to triglossica.com, let's say that again, and give it a try with their free options, see if it's anything for you, and if you want to continue, enjoy it. It's a really good piece of kit. I wouldn't recommend it for beginners though. You need a little bit of a start in the language before you get started. But once you have that basic introduction to a language, you can move on to Classica, and it will really help you solidify some of those grammar points and vocabulary as well, of course. So enjoy this episode with Azren, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to the podcast, Azren. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today on this nice Sunday. Do you want to start out by just giving everyone an idea of who you are, where you live, and how you got
Sure.
so interested into languages?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Azren, aka Azren the Language Nerd or Polyglot Azren. I'm from Canada and specifically Calgary. So it's more on like the west side of Canada. We had the Olympics here in 1980. Oh, 1980 something. I actually don't know what exact year, but anyway,
Ooh.
before I was born. um, I speak various languages. So I speak English, French, and Spanish quite fluently. So basically at the same level. And then my mother tongue is Gujarati, and I speak it decently well. I'm actually working on it currently and trying to improve, and especially on the reading and writing side and vocabulary side. And then I speak Mandarin as well, probably more at low intermediate level. And then I speak very rudimentary Hindi, so very, 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 very basic Hindi. Basically enough Hindi that when I'm in the airport and they're like, "Hey, take off your cap," or like, "Hey, what's in your pocket?" I can be like, I can understand and and kind of navigate it. So those are the languages I speak. I got into, I guess you could say languages have always been a part of my life because I went to a French immersion school in Canada. I grew up with English and Gujarati. And so it's always kind of been there, but I've really only been interested in them probably since I was, 15 years old. Because when I was 15, so I went on a French exchange trip for 3 months. So I went to France for 3 months. A French student lived in our house for 3 months. I was forced to go. My mom forced me. I actually didn't want to go. I was really upset about it at first.
Mm-hmm.
But, obviously I enjoyed it, had a lot of fun. And that's kind of when I came back from France, that's when I realized that, oh, wow, this language thing's kind of fun. Like, and I learned, like, when I came back from France, there's other people that went on the trip, and my French had, in my opinion at the time, I don't know if it was true, but I felt like, wow, I think my French has progressed more than most people. And it was interesting to notice that. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So studied Spanish after that. And then, as more time went on, I got more and more into languages.
Cool. So how old were you at the time when you
I was
went
about
on that?
15.
Cool. And that's how old are you now? Sorry.
I am 25.
Ah, that's 10 years ago. And how did
10
you?
years ago.
So that was the French immersion school, and then you went on a trip to sort of solidify and become really great at it, as you said. And how did you? When did you stop going away from? I don't know how to call it, like the school or the environment learning to self, finding your own interests and picking some languages you want to study, and not the what's in the school program. When did you start to do that?
The funny thing is that, so, and on one side, I never really stopped doing that because I majored in French, majored in Spanish. So I continued to take languages that were offered by the school system, whether it be a post-secondary, like in university, or whether it was in, high school where I took Spanish. But at the same time, probably I would say shortly after that trip is when I started to do other things that were not strictly in the school system. So for example, when I was, I believe it was grade 12, so would have been, I was about 17. I went to Peru, and I took an intensive Spanish course there. And so it was basically not exactly full time, but I'm sure it was 20, 30 hours a week, something like that, of Spanish. And so yeah, it probably would have been very, like, not that long after my French exchange trip.
Cool. So
Um,
how long was that Spanish course?
it wasn't that long because I did more touring. I went with my mom, and so I did. I think might have been a 1 week, maybe two. I should actually look back at that, see how many weeks it was. It was 1 or 2 weeks of intensive Spanish,
Right.
and then we did a couple weeks of touring.
Was that mainly focused on speaking, or did it have mostly like
Um,
classroom style grammar and
it was
kind of stuff?
classroom style. It was classroom style. That had reading, it had some writing, it had some speaking. It was I would say, a decent balance from what I remember.
Hmm.
Um, but they also, one thing that was kind of cool that the school did is that they would pair you with what's called a tandem. And the tandem was, funnily, I actually used to think it was a Spanish word. I didn't realize that it was like tandem was an English word. I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand what it was at first. I was like, tandem. Oh, I don't know what that is, but but basically it's like they pair you with local. It was in Cusco, so local Cusconian or whatever. Cusco. I'm not sure what you call a local Cusco person, but a local in Cusco, and they would help you with Spanish. You'd hang out. They'd show you the city. You'd go do things with them. They would hang out with you, and then you would help them with English. It was kind of a casual, in person, like just a casual person for you to know outside of the class. So that was pretty cool,
Hmm.
and gave me some like more non-classroom experience.
Yeah, because I get that. I guess that's the problem when you have, like you. I don't know how much French you were. Obviously, the immersion school was a lot of French, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how much you would actually encounter it in Calgary if you're living there. So I guess the problem for many people listening to this, they might have a lot of school, let's say French or German or Spanish, or those are the most common ones, I think. But like the idea of converting it into a sort of real language, a language you can speak to people. Did you ever encounter any hiccups there, any difficulties, or was the way you did it a factor in not experiencing those typical hiccups?
I didn't have any major issues because it's actually really funny. So for French, for example, I used to just, for whatever reason, I don't even know why, but the speaking and listening part was never a big weakness of mine. And even when I hadn't gone to France yet, even when I didn't necessarily feel passionate about languages, even when I just learned through school, like the speaking and listening was never awful. Like it was quite strong. I'm sure I made grammar mistakes. I'm sure there's definitely pronunciation mistakes, which I learned when I was in France and I was made fun of sometimes. But um, but like overall I was quite strong. So even when I went to France, it wasn't obviously like watching TV or listening to radio, some things like that were difficult, but just my regular day-to-day interactions with people at school, with my own exchange partner, with the family, those were generally speaking fine. There was no major things. um, Spanish as well. I mean, I've always been fascinated by the sounds of language, and so I spent a lot of time on it. So in Peru, again, this is pre knowing anything about language learning, like anything. What I used to do is I used to go into markets and practice with the vendors. So I would walk around and I'd be like, "Hola," they'd be like, "Hola," I'd be like, "Cómo estás?" Because that's what I wanted to practice. They'd say, "Ah, muy bien," and I'd be like, "Ah, muy bien. Cuánto cuesta, cuánto cuesta este or esta or whatever?" And they'd be like, "Oh, it costs this much." And I'd be like, "Oh, that's too expensive in Spanish. Can you do it for cheaper?" They'd be like, "Oh, my friend, no." I was like, "Okay, bye." Next door. "Hi, how are you? How much is this?" "Oh, that's too expensive. Bye." Oh.
That's amazing.
So I would just do that kind of stuff because I wanted to be able to speak. So I've never really experienced any major challenges.
That sounds pretty
'Cause
fearless compared to most people's experiences with foreign languages. Are you just a generally very extroverted person, or what? What do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I just want to talk. Like I do like people. I do. I also talk to myself,
Hmm.
or especially like I would talk to myself, or I would like, um, I'm trying to remember back now. Yeah, I couldn't tell you why, but actually, you know what it was? Now that I'm like thinking about it, I think it's that I used to think and I used to think after my French trip, because after my France trip, I came back, my French was so good. I remember French class was a joke. I didn't need to study grammar anymore. I knew what sounded right. If he said something, oh, that one sounds right, or that one looks right. Oh, that's got to be the one. Or my accent was really good. Like everything was just so easy. It was almost like it was like English all of a sudden. So I didn't need to study grammar rules. I never had to study for tests because I just would just be able to do it without anything. And I thought it was because I lived in France. It's like, oh, I lived in France. I had lots of talking and I listened so much. So talking must be the thing you have to do.
Mm.
And so when I was in Peru, so that's why I went to Peru to study or to learn Spanish, because I thought it was just a simple matter of traveling to the country that makes the difference, which is partially true, but also I've learned now it's not 100% the truth. Um, and so when I was in Peru, again, I just was associating it back to France and how what I thought worked for me in France, I better repeat that. So I better talk to lots of people, meet friends, listen lots, and just be really immersed. I thought that's what would work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a
And did
bravery
it?
thing, but um, yeah, it did. I wasn't like super duper fluent after spending a month or a little bit less than a month in Peru. But every time I've gone abroad and come back, it always has I just finished reading Gabriel Weiner's book Fluent Forever.
Hmm.
And I remember there's like a scene where he's like, hey, traveling to a country helps you understand the soul of the language. And I feel like when I do that, I come back, I really there's something different about my understanding of the language. I feel closer to it, and it's really difficult to explain. Um, yeah, I just feel much closer. I feel like I have firsthand experience with it, not just the teacher telling me or some textbook or seeing it through a video. Like I've experienced, oh, when you go buy something, people don't say, hello, what would you like to buy? They say, what would you like? Or they would, or whatever
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
whatever they say. So,
You're in the real world of foreign languages.
mm-hmm.
I think I agree with you in that. I think that it gives a special feeling when you're there, and I guess also there's the victories. This even if they're just really small, like you understand someone saying even the simplest of things. I think makes it real in a way. Whereas if you're just at home reading it, teach yourself, you're like, yeah, it's great that I know this, but I mean, unless somebody actually asks me this, it's just theoretical. So I feel that way when I actually get something right. It kind of sends out a little bit of a positive feeling throughout the body, and it makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious on your perspective now because you brought up something really interesting, and I'm curious for my own reasons now just out of curiosity. So myself, whenever I learn languages, I find that I need lots and lots of different, I guess you could say, I need to listen to lots and lots of different people in different scenarios. I need to end up being in lots of different types of scenarios where I need to speak in different scenarios. I need to almost go through that. But I found now that I've been more and more, now a couple of years now, I've been more in this whole language learning space and talking to other language enthusiasts and everything. And I guess I found that that's not really the case for a lot of people. It's not necessarily how everyone is. And I was wondering, just for you personally, is that how do you normally go about it? How do you normally go about it?
That's an interesting one. I think my experience learning, I'll talk about Russian because that's the one I've spent the most time doing independently. I did a lot of German in school, so that was kind of I don't know what to call it, like hand holding. My hand was held for many years in German classes, so I didn't really have a choice or any significant impact on what to study when. But for Russian, I feel like the best analogy I could come up with is like a puzzle. Like imagine a massive puzzle, let's say 1,000 pieces or more, and that is the Russian language or whatever language you're learning. Every time you do something with that language, whether it's speaking, listening, writing, reading, you add a piece to that puzzle. And unfortunately, we can never fill out the puzzle. It's kind of a never-ending task that approaches being filled out, but never really does. But I feel like you that the assimilation happens from anywhere, and it's kind of like you listen to the same word over and over, but you don't get it until you do something else with it, maybe. So for me, I think you're describing a key to language learning itself, which is you need a lot of input from a lot of different sources to actually build the language in your head. Because interestingly, this was one of the few and only things I learned from linguistics class. I did a course at first year uni in English, and this was one of the things that stuck with me, is that when we speak, we don't have memorization of sentences. Like we can definitely, when we learn a foreign language, we can kind of hold on to a few fixed phrases and stuff. But once we're at a confident level, we actually just generating new sentences based on what we know. And every sentence that I'm saying, like the words that I've just said, has never been said before. That total sentence, just because of the way the numbers work out. If you do the multiplication, let's say 10 words, 10 different words, the chances that someone else has spoken those exact same 10 words in that sequence is near zero. Which means that we don't memorize, like our speech center is generating. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to understand. Well, maybe we don't even understand how we understand it, but the brain needs to know the language on a far deeper level than memorizing that if the word ends in A, we have to use this word, And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I definitely think that we're assimilating.
I think it does. And I think what it makes me think about is it makes me think about how I was thinking about this just yesterday or a couple of days ago. It makes me think almost about how when we're, at least in my perspective, when we're learning a language, there's almost like a few different, I think you can say quote unquote phases of actually knowing something, whether that knowing something is grammar, whether it's vocabulary, whether it's pronunciation, whatever it is. It almost starts with like a theoretical knowledge. You now theoretically understand that, okay, a cell phone in blah, blah, blah language in Mandarin is Shouji. Like you now understand, okay, on a theoretical level, this is what the characters look like. I've read in a book, I've read in a self-study program, a friend told me, you have the theoretical knowledge. Okay, this is Shouji, this is a cell phone. Cool. Now, but the reality is that just like you said, just because if you know, for example, the example you gave with verbs, if you know something ends in a because it's, it's paired with such and such subject, doesn't mean you can now use it, right? Right. And then it's almost like, in my perspective, it's almost like if there's a second phase, it's almost like you're understanding social scripts. So the example I'll give is like when I used to go to markets in Peru, man, I could navigate those markets so well because I knew every single thing that a vendor would ever say to me.
Yeah.
I just knew it. There's not that many things they can say to you. There's like 17 things or whatever the number is. You just know them. Yeah, and I know there's only 10 ways I could potentially reply, and you just kind of get them, and it's almost like this drill in your brain, just a pattern. All of a sudden, it feels really natural.
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
And then you've done that enough times with enough scenarios, and all of a sudden, somehow, it's like it's like you're saying with the puzzle. It's kind of like you're putting these different puzzle pieces together, and then one day your brain goes, "Hey, that puzzle kind of looks like a fish. Whoa, I didn't realize it looked like a fish." And when you've done that, now your brain's made another deeper connection,
Yeah,
and
it
now
does.
you can start to put together different. Now you're at this point where it's not just you've memorized a bunch of social scripts, and you can do those automatically, but now you can start to almost blend a social script. You can make the connection of an unconscious connection, I would imagine, of like, oh yeah, when I was at, the vendors, the conversations went like this. Oh, in a restaurant, they're probably going to be pretty similar.
Oh
Or
yeah,
like you start to extrapolate, and then you're unconsciously extrapolating. And all of a sudden, you're like, I don't know where the heck that came from. I don't know where the heck. How did I even like? I recently was doing a summer camp, running a summer camp with a bunch of Chinese teenagers, and they're all Chinese and they speak Mandarin. I was running in English, but sometimes we speak in Mandarin. And what did I say? I wish I remember what I said, but I said something, and then I was like, where the heck did that come from? Like, I've never said that in my life. I don't think I've ever heard, like, where did that, it felt so spontaneous. And I was like, that's so weird.
I've tried that twice.
Yeah.
First time was with a random piece of knowledge in, I don't
Hmm.
know if you know the game Trivial Pursuit.
I do.
But somebody asked, who was the famous conductor leading the Berlin Classic Symphony Orchestra in the years 1989 till 1996 or something crazy?
Okay.
And I just randomly watched a YouTube video like 2 years before,
Hmm.
and for some reason this name had just settled in, and I cannot explain to you the look on people's faces when I just kind of blurted out this name. It's
Hmm.
not a common name or anything. Um, and the other time was when I was doing some flashcards on Memrise, and I think I'd seen the word once. It was a really complicated Russian word, and I just kind of like, yeah, this is how it is, and just typed it in. It's like, but then I stopped myself, going, I don't even know where I got that from.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of our brains, really, and the
Hmm.
speech center. But what an amazing way to describe it! It kind of made me think that on one hand, I was thinking, are we doing the whole language learning wrong, or wrongly? I guess is the correct English word to say it. By doing sort of a mechanical introduction. We're always learning. I wouldn't call it scripts necessarily, but we're doing a very memory-based initial approach, which then, after only a long time, goes into this kind of, it's the stages of competence, isn't it? Like you're unconsciously competent, or you're unconsciously incompetent, and you move to unconsciously competent, blah blah
Right.
blah. But I was thinking, I think it must be required, right? There must be necessary to start with this kind of artificial language. Let's say you're learning German, you're not learning German actually. You're just learning a very sort of basic form of it that can
Hmm.
placehold until you get more. I don't know. What do you
Hmm.
think about it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like I don't. I think one thing that I've been thinking about a little bit is I think we overemphasize the importance of the tool of how we're learning,
Hmm.
whether it's a study yourself program, whether it's taking a class, whether it's whatever. I think the tool is the tool, and yes, there's some things that will work better than others. Yes, maybe in theory you shouldn't do, you shouldn't study like this. Yes, in theory, maybe it's, you know, um, in theory you should practice daily. There's a lot of different theories or tools, and we put a lot of importance on these tools, and we have to find the right tool that works best for us. But it's kind of like I almost feel like the tool is just a tool, and it depends on how you use it.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I attended a Mandarin event like a little while ago in my own city, and it was just supposed to be a casual. There's a new group on Meetup.com, a brand new group. I met the girl recently who started it, and I was like, "Oh, you started a Chinese group? Oh, I'd love to come." So we go, and this girl, I don't think she's done a lot of teaching before. I don't think, maybe she has, but and we get there, and it wasn't. It was fine. It was actually really good. I learned a lot. It wasn't. I guess if you were to rate on how effectively was the event, how effectively did she teach, I would say that it probably wasn't super duper duper effective. So in theory, the tool was not that great. But she taught me some cool things. She taught me, for example, the expression to eat vinegar. So, 吃醋, right? In
What?
吃醋in Mandarin, right? Which
To
means to
eat
be like you're
vinegar.
jealous.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That's
right.
fantastic.
Which sounds like and it was funny. She told it to me. She told me a bunch of random stuff. There's no connection between them. But myself, I've been thinking about them so much the past like whatever 5 days or so. They've been like running every time. I'm like, oh wow! Every time I feel jealous, I'm like, oh wow! I'm really eating vinegar right now. Jeez Louise, like this is crazy. Or like they're always in my mind. I'm like, oh, wasn't that a funny expression she taught me about? Like I learned word for narrator recently. I was like, doesn't that sound kind of pang by pang? Kind of reminds me of fat. I think there's a word for pang, which is also fat. It's like, oh, it's like a fat, and bai is like it's what we used to call my great grandma. So like, oh, it's like a fat great grandma. Isn't that so funny? Like it bounces in my. So even though necessarily how I learned these words wasn't necessarily the most effective way, it's what you're doing after with it that matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like how you use the tool matters more than the tool.
And also the time you can spend with the tool, because it doesn't matter if we have the most efficient theoretical language learning tool that will make you fluent in 3 months if you cannot be bothered to use it, like if it's too boring to use.
Sure.
So I'd rather use the tool that I like to use.
But even if it is boring, like I'm gonna be doing a degree in Mandarin starting this fall.
Oh, nice.
It's going to be boring. I'm not going to like it. I'm going to complain about it. I know it's going to be awful. I'm going to probably skip half my classes. I'm not going to go. It's going to be awful. I'm not going to necessarily enjoy the classes too much. I'm probably going to have teachers or professors that go, oh my God, where do they get their teaching degree? Like, what is happening here? Like, I'm going to be bored. It's probably not, I'm going to enjoy the process of university because I like university. I like being with people and I like that. Right. But the classes themselves are probably not going to be fantastic. But I know I'm doing it. Number one, it forces me to actually study. Number two, I'm more interested in actually watching the teacher and not what they're teaching me, but I'm more interested in seeing how do they actually use the language.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I think
So like the tool's going to suck, but it doesn't matter. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for the tool. I'm using the tool differently than, I don't care what you tell me, teacher. I'm more watching your actions.
Yeah, and
say whatever you want.
You've got the goals there as well, because your goal is obviously to finish the degree and get your piece of paper saying you can now read and write and speak and listen in this language. That helps focus on the task ahead, even though each individual step might be, let's say, painful or boring. But if you hadn't had that kind of structure, you wouldn't just let's say there was this class every day. You wouldn't just walk in and do it, I would imagine, unless you had that goal at the end. Maybe you would use other methods then in that case. But hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick break from today's episode with Azren to just thank Classica, the show's sponsor, for being involved and for supporting and backing a project that I've been working on for so many years. At the Actual Fluency Podcast, in case you didn't know, it's been going on for over 4 years, and there's been over 125 episodes published. Classica is a big company that provides a lot of language courses. I think they have over 50 languages now, and each of the courses highly contextualized, so you get a lot of sentences in context that you can then you tweak with a lot of tools. You can train it, you can practice, you can go over it. So it's kind of a nice to do. I really like their hands-off approach as well. They have a mode where you just press a button and you don't have to click anything, you don't have to do anything. It just sort of puts the reps together, a bit like a training program. So if you want to give Classica a try, and be sure to tell them Kris sent you, go to tryglassica.com, and Classica is spelled Glossika, and give it a try.
Yeah, and I think it's for me, like I know myself, and I think like the self-awareness, this is a big one, and this is something I've been talking about on my podcast a little bit recently. Is like the self-awareness is really important. Like I know I'm hit and miss with accountability to myself with languages. Like I won't, sometimes I'll listen, sometimes I'll make a plan and I'll do it, and sometimes it's not going to happen. I will put my work goals above my language goals. I know that. And so I need to have an external accountability. And even though I know university, I'm still not going to go to all my classes. I know I'm still going to get 0 on 10 on some tests because I didn't study the character. It's still going to happen.
Hmm.
But because I know I have to do decent, it's going to force me to do this stuff. It's going to give me a real like external accountability to do it,
Mm.
right? Versus just solely relying on internal accountability, which I think for myself, and maybe not for other people, but I think for myself at a minimum, the internal accountability sometimes is just not enough. And I need the outside accountability to make me do the stuff that I know I want to do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I definitely have similar feelings. I can let myself down,
Mm-hmm.
but letting, let's say, other people down or a school is more difficult.
Totally. Or like they'll embarrass you, like, and they don't intentionally embarrass you, but like when you've
Yeah,
gotten like 0 on 10 on 3, I know they're going to be daily quizzes. I know a lot of the Chinese professors that have taken a couple of Mandarin classes years ago, and I've met a lot of them. So I know they're going to give daily quizzes and on character writing. And I
all
know
right.
there's going to be like 3 in a row where I get 0, and she's going to be like, not in front of the whole class, but like when she's handing the quiz back to me, she'll probably be like, Azren, what's going on? And I know that 7 people are going to hear me, and I'm competitive.
Yeah.
I'm competitive. I don't want people to think I'm bad, and I'll be like, well, screw you guys. I'm gonna get 10 on 10 on the next 4, and I'm only gonna study for 10 minutes. Watch me. Like, it's gonna be extremely like, yeah, it's gonna be
But
weird.
that's so powerful, though. That's amazing, to
Yeah,
get that done. But
yeah.
I just want one last thing before we move
Go for
on
it.
here.
Yeah.
Just wanted to definitely have a few more areas to discuss with you, but I also want to just explore this a little bit more. We were talking about, let's say, quote unquote, boring methods, whether they work or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally unsure about this actually, because
Mm-hmm.
when I started Russian a couple of years ago, I did this crazy memorize test because I just wanted to see what effect it would have if I did a large number of words every day. So I think I did about 1,000 words in a month,
Okay.
which was about, I think it was about an hour or maybe 2 hours a day, just consistent doing memorizing. Which I know some people have done way more than that on memorize. If you look, some people have millions and millions of points even on a monthly basis. But for me, I just found the tool pretty much. It was a lot, and but what I discovered was it actually does work. I did learn words. The problem is that's not the same as learning the language.
Sure.
It's great that you can pick up words out in context or out of context even, but that doesn't help you speak. So I would definitely be cautious about using these kind of highly efficient methods like
Mm-hmm.
flashcards, which are, to me, using memorize back then was like the Matrix. You kind of like downloading a language to your brain,
Mm-hmm.
which is only half the truth, I guess. You're
Yeah.
definitely downloading words to your brain because just the way spaced repetition works,
Yep.
it's incredible. But I wasn't able to convert it into actual speech, and that was probably partly on my fault. I wasn't doing a lot of tutoring back then. When I started getting a tutor, it really exploded how fast I progressed.
Yep.
But yeah, just to wrap that up with efficient methods, I don't really believe that. I think what you can do consistently will trump any efficiency rating, whatever that may be.
Yep.
And if you can, watch 5 movies a day in your target language, but you can't do 5 minutes of Duolingo or something, then, well, clearly the movies are going to give you way more.
Totally.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's all
It
about,
also. I think it also depends on how you use like what you're doing with it after. Like it's like you did all memories flashcards, which is fantastic. That's great. But if you didn't do anything with it, if you didn't actually apply
exactly.
the knowledge, right? Like then it's useless, right? Like if you took all the classes, like you could be like, here's a good example. You could even be like, I'm gonna travel abroad and live abroad for 3 months. I'm gonna practice and talk and everything. That's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What's next? You flew back home and then you didn't study. And then you lost it all or you forgot a lot of it. Great, you took all these classes. What's next?
Yeah.
Did you use it? Oh no, you didn't. Oh, it's always what's next. Doesn't matter what you did. What happened next?
Yeah, exactly. And also using, I think it's always about connecting the methods. So for
Totally.
instance, if I didn't memorize to that extent every month and I had, let's say, a 3 tutoring lessons a week, using that vocabulary, building up some kind of sentences, talking to my tutor, I would
Totally.
be much better at Russian than I am today. And I think the same goes with watching movies or books. For instance, now I'm reading the Harry Potter, the classic, the classic polyglot
Yep.
book. Um, it's like a canon, isn't it? It's like the number one that everyone's reading. But it's not efficient. Well, okay, I mean, it's great for me to just read it and read it aloud to get the experience and see the words over and over, try to extrapolate the meaning. But the real, I think, key would be for me to write down phrases that I didn't understand, add them to
Hmm.
flashcards, and ask a Russian native speaker to actually translate for me.
Yeah, totally.
If
So
I
again,
get
it's all
messed up,
about the what's next, right? Like
yeah,
if you read
exactly.
it,
So
totally.
exactly. So if you're just reading books all the time, I don't think you get far. And
Hmm.
likewise, if you just do flashcards, I don't think you get far. But
Totally.
combining them would be huge, like
Yeah.
movies and subtitles, or tutoring and flashcards, or um,
Yeah. That's a good
but
point.
it's an interesting discussion though, nonetheless, on
Hmm.
like methods, because we're fed all this information, like ads and marketing. Oh, the newest language fad gets ruined in a week, and it just doesn't seem very believable. And most people give up, of course, which is the biggest problem, I guess. Did you
Hmm.
ever face problems with motivation, or like where you just felt like, ugh, I don't want to do this anymore?
Of course, yeah, I do, but I don't beat myself up over them because it's such a language learning is such a long term process for me that if I have a bad 6 months, it doesn't matter because I'm scoring myself on how I do in a 30-year macro.
Right.
Or like not even and not even it's not really 30 years. What I mean, I use that to make a point. Like it's a long time. Like
Yeah.
we're probably, unless I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I'm probably gonna be alive to for the next 70 years, 60 years, 80 years. Like I'm gonna live a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I have a bad 6 months, it's like having a bad 1 hour in the big
Yeah.
scheme of things, right? So like I haven't touched Mandarin that much. I mean, actually that's not true. Lately I haven't. But let's say if we were having this conversation, let's say a month or 2 months ago, I would have said to you, hey man, I haven't touched Mandarin for we would have been what in like June, so probably would have been about 8, 9, 10 months. Like just nothing. Like
Yeah.
just hadn't looked at it. And you could theoretically say, and I didn't want it. I just didn't feel like it. Here's a better example. About 2 weeks ago, I stopped taking my Gujarati lessons with my tutor. Fantastic tutor, by the way. Amazing teacher. Very affordable. Great. Like committed to the lessons. Like fantastic. Like really, like the best Gujarati teacher I've ever had. One of the best, one of the better tutors I've ever had. But I told her, I was like, hey, let's postpone it. I don't feel like doing this. But I don't care. I don't beat myself up because I know it's okay. It's okay. Like
Yeah.
I'm taking a step backwards, and I know that I'm going to take 2 steps forward in the future. I know I'm going to be taking some big steps forward with Mandarin once I'm back, and even currently I'm working on it as well. But especially once I start in September. So net, I'm up. Net, I've made progress, and the little steps backwards is just how life works.
Yeah. And do you also find that once you return, you've made new neural connections that you didn't have before?
That's a weird thing. I don't think everyone has, but I do experience that sometimes, and it depends on how long it's been. It really
Yeah.
depends on how long it's been. But there's a point where if I spend time away from a language, it's kind of like if you're letting some soup stew on the stove, like it's stewing,
Yeah.
and then you come back like, whoa, all the flavors are really delicious.
I totally
Um,
believe that. I totally
yeah,
believe the brain is working on sorting out those that's called problems, or lack of comprehension. I think the brain's always working on that, and I definitely feel better when I come back to a language
yeah.
after a little break than I was before.
Now,
Now
here's
that
the
like,
thing, though, that and this is maybe just my personal experience, and maybe this isn't everyone, but for me, I find that is especially true after I've come back from an intensive experience, such as traveling abroad, or if I've taken something that was really meant like I had a lot of like it's like I've had a lot of input, a lot of
yeah,
experiences. Then that's true, but if I didn't, and I just kind of maybe I'll say weekly classes, then I just kind of let it go. Then maybe not. Then it's like,
okay, that's
ooh, then I'm
interesting.
dusting off the cobwebs.
I
So
didn't, yeah, I didn't really think about that. There's obviously different scenarios for coming back to a language. If you just kind of said, "Meh, never mind," for a few months, then maybe the effect isn't as strong. But
mhm.
I guess the reason that I experience these more significant changes is probably because the reason I take the break is because I overloaded myself for a while. So
Right.
I just did way too much. So the brain is working on all that input while I'm sort of gone away. But I hadn't really thought about that. That's probably true.
Yeah, because I think anyone you talk to in the language learning communities, that's probably like, anyone who's really, let's say, anyone who has language learning as like a significant priority, whether it's a hobby, whether it's their work, whether, even if it is a hobby, that's probably true. But if you talk to like, that's one of the things I like about teaching. I teach as my full-time job, teach different languages. And that's it's one of the interesting things I've noticed is what things I would experience or someone in the language learning community would experience with language learning, and what a quote unquote normal, a quote unquote, someone who just wants to learn it, maybe they're taking a couple hours a week of classes or something, but their life is not focused around that. It's interesting to see what experiences I would have or we would have in comparison to them, because they're completely different.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well. And speaking about hobby versus full time, I've seen you make a lot of stuff online on the social media, and you've got a YouTube channel, Azren the language nerd,
Mm-hmm.
believe it's called. What does it mean to be a language nerd? Maybe you want to just give a little quick introduction to that.
For me anyway, it means if you're just like, you could be a Harry Potter nerd, just like you could be a language. It's just being very interested and kind of, it's like being nerdy about something. So the same way you see someone who's like a computer nerd or like they're a computer geek, it's because they know a lot about computers and they know a lot of the technical words, they know a lot about it, they're interested in it, and you're like, wow, that's really nerdy. Or like someone who's like super into, I don't know, like Harry Potter. I'm a big Harry Potter nerd, by the way, but like Harry Potter, like, oh wow, who the weatherman was in the first book. That's nerdy. Like, like that's what it means to me. It's like someone who, I really like learning languages, and so I spend a lot of time with it. My whole, it's like my whole life is about languages. Like literally my whole life, I'm either always teaching, I'm always talking about them, or I'm thinking about them, or running language learning events. Like that's all I do.
Yeah.
All the time.
Do you ever find like it's hard to do your own learning sometimes when you're so busy either teaching other people to learn or posting videos or podcasts or even Instagram videos, Snapchat videos about learning, talking about doing it rather than doing it?
Yeah, I think in some ways yes, in some ways no. So in some ways yes, in the sense that I'm not spending 3 hours a day or a quarter of my day solely on learning blah 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 language. But one thing I'll do is I will blend my work to help me improve my languages in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes that happens serendipitously, like by coincidence. Sometimes it's on purpose. So a great example would be I was running the summer camp I told you with a lot of the Chinese teenagers, and we were doing some video work. Actually, I was teaching them basic video production, basic video editing, and a lot of these guys don't know a lot of words associated with online video. They might not know upload, download, narrator, main character, protagonist. Like a lot of these words might be new. So I decided, hey, why don't we do a game for 45 minutes where we go through what they are. I have flashcards with all the different cards in English, so narrator, all the words. And then we're going to go through, make sure they know what they are, and make sure they know what they are in Mandarin. When they say in Mandarin, I'll be like, oh, say that again? Oh, can you write that down? Let's write that one down too. So I'm leveraging my work to learn more Mandarin.
That's a good idea, yeah.
So that happens to me for sure.
Like I find it hard sometimes to, let's say, writing blog posts and emails and doing podcast recordings, and then at the end of the day you're like, oh yeah, I should probably do a little bit myself as well. I sometimes struggle with that, especially with having a full-time job on the side, which doesn't help, but at the same time it also gives like a natural time of day where I can actually do it. So
yeah, I'm a fan of blending. Like I really like to blend things. Like even like my French, I did I'm trying to think of good examples. Like even French, I was recently the announcer for American football game, but I had to do it in French. So I learned a lot. I probably know more than almost the entire population about, almost the entire world. I know more about French football than most other people in the world. But like it's because it got combined with it, right? So
do you mean like the American football?
Yeah, American football. European?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so well, there's not much French American football, I guess. At least not the.
Exactly. It's exactly my point, which is why I know something super specialized, which I think I feel very proud about.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you hold on to your victories. That's
Yep.
a masterpiece anyway. So what is the? Do you have any goals with your let's say your YouTube channel or social media efforts? Do you see this becoming like your full-time thing, or do you want to stay a teacher? What's the future look like?
So basically, the simplest way to put it is the following. I basically have so on a day-to-day basis, what pays my bills is my teaching, right? I teach small groups. I teach language learning. Excuse me. I teach various languages to small groups,
Hmm.
4 people, 3 people, 2 people, 5 people, etc. So part of my day is just teaching, doing things locally to find students, doing things that are like, hey, I'm going to put an ad on Facebook. I'm going to put an ad on this website. I'm going to go to this event because I can probably get a student. I'm going to, I'm going to come up with this promotion because I think I can get more money out of it. I'm going to do this and like just day to day business kind of stuff to pay my bills and get through life and etc. Right, grow the business, like just very businessy kind of sales and marketing, like numbers and spreadsheets and logic, and that's a good chunk of my day.
Mm.
That is very separate from my YouTube and my Instagram and my podcast and my Snapchat and my everything, blogging. All it's very separate. The online stuff for me is basically a really big networking play.
Mm.
It's just a big networking play that opens up who knows what opportunities.
Yeah,
So I'm
well, that's
super
how
duper
I
active because yeah, go
that's
ahead.
how I found out about you. So it definitely it definitely works.
Yep. So I don't know what it leads to, and I don't even. It's why one of the things that's different about me is there's nothing you can buy from me. Like if you follow me, and I'm posting all this stuff, there's nothing at the end of the funnel. I mean, sure, maybe you can hire me for online tutoring, but at the same time, that's not even my primary work. It's not even like
Mm.
it's not my primary work is not Skype teaching because
Right.
it's not my primary. I might do it if it comes to me. I might say yes, sure, but it's not my major thing. Um, so that's one of those. It's very interesting. It's a kind of a backwards thing for some people. It's really difficult for people to wrap their heads around. But for me, it's more of a that's more of a long term play because I know one day someone, maybe Tetsu hits me up and he's like, "Hey, Azren, I'm kind of tired of running Langfest. It's pretty big now. I've known you for 7 years. Do you want to run it?" And how
Yeah.
did he hear me? Because he saw something. It's just a big networking play. You have no idea. You have no idea, right?
Right. Yeah, I
You have no
agree
idea
with
what
that.
leads
I
to.
mean,
So
it's the Gary Vaynerchuk school of thought. You know, you do a lot
sure.
of you put yourself out there in so many ways and provide all the value. I guess that's not even he didn't even come up with that, but in general, just provide all
Something
the
he
value.
talks about. I didn't know you followed
Yeah, he
him.
talks about it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
he had a book about it as well.
yeah.
Um, but um, but that's basically what I did as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this podcast has always been free. There's no cost or anything. I've always
Yeah.
been blogging a lot and email
Mm-hmm.
list and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's presented me with lots of opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't done it. So speaking of Langfest, like I
Mm-hmm.
was invited to come to the first one,
Mm-hmm.
and they even paid for half of my travel.
Cool.
So,
Yeah.
which was quite a lot coming from Europe. You know,
Yeah.
it's a expensive time to go to Canada. I'll tell you, in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of July,
Yeah.
end of July, I think it was,
Yeah.
and that was like high season. So flight tickets were like I don't know $1,000 at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely highly appreciated, and I've become good friends with Tetsu and Joey who run it, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the other people who were there. Are you gonna go this year?
Yep. Yeah. I'm speaking this year.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So jealous.
Are you there this
Such-
year? Or no, you're not going.
no, I can't.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just it's too far. Like
Yeah.
unless they want to, pay for my flight, which I don't deserve at all. So I'm
Yeah.
not fishing for anything.
Yeah.
But it's just not feasible at
Yep.
this time.
Yep.
Hopefully next year. But I've said that last year as well, I believe. So, but then
Mm-hmm.
again, I didn't know I was moving to the UK. I didn't know I was moving jobs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say I would love to go to Langfest just because not only I think the event is quite fantastic and the people who go there are amazing and always interesting and fun to hang out with,
Mm-hmm.
but the city itself is also just perfect for
Totally.
it.
Totally.
such a lovely place, and the weather is just spectacular.
Hmm.
Got that really European feel, I feel like,
It does.
in many parts of the city, and it's just really weird to be in North America and have European feel, but I love it there. I would live there if I could, but I think I'd have to marry someone to have a chance of staying there longer than a few months.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. What are you going to talk about?
Just talking mostly about dialectal differences. So part one will be like what makes different dialects different. Like talking about what are the consistent things that are different between different dialects of a language. And then more of a concentrated focus on different dialects of Spanish. And so the difference is talking about, okay, so for example, like if you're in this region, it's probably more like this. If you're here, it's probably more like this. If you're here, you're going to drop your final S's and they're going to do something like this. And Cuba, they're going to do this and blah, 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 blah. And obviously not every region, because I don't know every single region, but I am reasonably knowledgeable on the topic.
Nice.
It's something I need to brush up on for sure, but it is something that I actually took a whole class on it. I remember in university we took an entire class on, first of all, phonetics in Spanish and phonology in Spanish. But then more importantly was we would study the I don't even know how many regions we studied, but so many. We look at, okay, here's various speakers from this part of Peru. Here's various speakers from this part of Peru. Let's compare. Here's people from this. For example, there's commonalities between how people speak on the coasts of different countries that speak Spanish. It's really weird, but if you're on the coast, often you drop your S's at the end of the syllable. If there's an S at the end of the syllable, you don't pronounce it. Even though one person's in Colombia and one person's in Chile, you both still do the same thing in that element of the accent, which is just really interesting.
That is strange and interesting at the same time. Definitely content suitable for a Langfest. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna.
So it's something I have to like prepare for properly to make sure I've like brushed off and like I know my stuff properly. But it's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I did study it very intensely in university, and then casually, obviously, over the years.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd highly recommend people going to Langfest. I know it's a bit last minute now, but if you listen to this and you want to go, it's in 3 weeks' time, I think.
Yeah, it's August 24th to the 26th or something like that, end of August.
Right, so 2-3 weeks to go, and I'm sure it's going to be epic. Like last year, I always get massive jealousy issues when I go on social media. Everyone just hanging out, because I just remember back to the first year, which was, like I said, just a really incredible place. And you couldn't pick a better place in that part of the world, I think, than Montreal. So very, very, jealous about that. But it's all right. I'll follow in spirit. I'll be there.
Yeah.
And I hope your talk goes really well. That could also lead to other places, the talk.
Yeah, you have no idea. It's crazy.
But anyway, here are the last few minutes of the episode. Just wanted to give you a chance to, share the projects you're working on, the URLs or any kind of place where people can find you. Where if people have some questions for you, maybe where can they find you online?
Totally. So probably the place I would, considering this is a podcast, I think my podcast would probably be the primary thing that I'd want to talk about. It's called the Language Learning Show. You can find it on any, iTunes, everywhere. iTunes, Overcast, Spotify, everywhere. And then on social media, I'm on. If it exists, I'm on it, and it's at Polyglot Azren. So like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Medium.com, Tumblr, Musical.ly, you name it, I'm on. You name it, I'm on it.
You've been addicted to the social media.
Oh no, it's just a good idea. It's just a good idea. Like
spreading.
Like Musical.ly and Tumblr, I don't use as often, but if you message me there, I will probably get the message. Or like I don't use them very often, but I like they're the things I watch and I keep an eye on, because you never know. Maybe Tumblr decides tomorrow, like, hey, we're gonna do this cool feature, and everyone flocks to Tumblr. Like who the heck knows, right? And musically
Yeah,
really is fascinating. Musically is like I wish there's an extra 2 hours in the day every day because I would be so in on musically. It fascinates me.
I don't even understand it. I saw my, I think, is it 10-year-old niece?
Yeah,
No, not niece. What's it called? My someone far out. Let's call it that.
sure,
Cousin. Sorry.
sure.
Or what's the next level cousin?
Uh,
I
Second
forgot.
cousin? I don't know.
So, I don't know. It's far out anyway. She's about 10 years old, and she was big fan of Musically and showed me a bit of it, and I was like, I don't understand this. I
It's
feel
quite bizarre, and some of my most embarrassing content is on Musical.ly because I'm just trying to understand it, and like it's so dumb. But I leave it there because I know it's gonna be really funny to look back at one day, and someone will bring it up in an interview. It's gonna be embarrassing. I'll have a good laugh over it, but it
I just feel
is,
old when I talk about it because
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, there's been so many social networks. I was on MySpace back in the day, and it's like all these new networks keep popping up, and
yeah,
you don't really know where they're going to go. They could go
yeah.
to the moon like Instagram did or in Snapchat, but I don't know. Maybe I feel like they all have problems. Like the I don't know how the income is doing for many of them, but to deserve was it 3 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion valuation,
Yeah,
you really need to make some money, and I don't know if they are starting to do that now or
no
how's it,
idea. I don't
but
know enough about it. But I know people are on it. I can have their attention on it. I
exactly.
can.
You gotta
I'm also have some slight
have people.
narcissistic tendencies, so I like that
All
people
right.
listen to me. So it feeds that slight narcissism. So it's
Well, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. I've seen some of it, and it's definitely very entertaining. And
yep,
for me, just having regular language learning content kind of inspires me to do more.
yep,
So,
totally.
I like that. But anyway, thank you for coming on and
Yeah, thanks
for
for having
the
me.
wonderful discussion. And best luck with everything. And I
Thank
hope
you.
to see you somewhere in the world. Are you planning on going to Europe for any of the events? Maybe the conference or next year's gathering, maybe?
When is the year? What are some dates for Europe events this year? Are there any going on?
Yeah, so the Polyglot conference is the end of October in
Okay.
Slovenia,
Okay.
uh, and the gathering will be next year in end of May. So there's lots of time for that one.
Got it. So
Uh,
October is the next one.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
conference by Richard Simcott and Alex Rawlings, the one
Okay.
they do every year in a new place, which is interesting, but
Yeah.
obviously a little bit biased towards Europe, just because there's so many
Yeah.
countries that
Yep. Yep. Yep.
it's easier for them. So, but I can't imagine they wouldn't bring it to
If I could
America.
get there affordably, like extremely affordably, I'll make it. But if it's going to be
Ah, you
super
can't.
costly, then
It's
yeah, it's
impossible.
yeah.
Not Slovenia. You can't get there. Like you would have to. I don't know what you would do from Canada. You'd probably fly to Frankfurt or something and change, or maybe go to some other city nearby and go by bus or rent a car or something.
Who
It's
knows?
really
Yeah.
not a typical destination for transatlantic flights,
Hmm.
but that also makes it slightly exciting. I've never heard anything about Slovenia, so for me, I'll definitely see if I can make it. I might be moving jobs there, so it might not work out. But
Yeah.
like you, if I can, then I definitely will.
Yeah. Totally.
All right.